theyeshiva.net.
Today's shiur is dedicated in the loving memory of a woman who passed away just a few days ago, the end of last week, Yente Bas Reb Menachem Mendel Zilberberg, Nie Eichenstein, who was the sole survivor of a large family, survived Auschwitz. Her mother and her father and 7 of her siblings were sent to Auschwitz, and her mother and 7 siblings were all murdered on the same day when they arrived, Yud Sivan Tovshin Daled, that's June 1944, together with aunts and many cousins, a large extended family exterminated in one day. Her father was murdered a few months later, Simchas Torah Tovshin Hey, Simchas Torah 1944, and she was literally a sole survivor of a large family. And yet, although she lost everything, she did not lose her generosity, her humanness, her humanity, her spirit, her faith, and her kindness. And she built a big family after the war. Her husband was Rabbi Akiva Zilberberg, Olav Shalom, the son of the famous Pittsburgher Rav. And she was a descendant of the famous Eichenstein and Laufer dynasties. Tehei Nishmasa Tzrura B'Tzer HaChaim. I want to ask you a question. Are you an escapist? Are you a conformist? Are you a fighter? Or do you just remain passive? Anybody wants to answer? What about this morning? If you came here, you had to fight, right? Just to get into the parking lot. It turns out that at one of the earliest moments of our history, our people divided into 4 groups. And when one studies about these 4 groups, one learns not only about what happened then, but also what continues to happen now. The Jewish people in the beginning of Parshas Beshalach have left Egypt. Vayihi Beshalach Paroi es ha'am. Paroi at last has sent out the nation. The man who for a long time said, Lo yashaleach, I will not send them, was compelled to send them. At last, a people, a nation of slaves, subjugated and crushed, has embarked on its journey towards freedom. And yet, when they discover that Paroi and his troops are pursuing them, and pursuing them aggressively, because when Paroi hears a few days later that they're gone and they're never coming back, he is suddenly transformed. He has a change of heart. And he tells his people, and the people tell him, and they tell each other, what did we do to emancipate a band of slaves? So he summons his nation, mobilizes his troops, harnesses hundreds of chariots, and off they go to pursue the Jewish people to bring back the slaves to Egypt. And the Torah says when the Jews lift up their eyes and they see the Egyptians pursuing them, the expression is Vayiru Ma'oid. They were gripped by excessive fear. They were in terror, they were in dread. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael al Hashem, they scream out to Hashem. And then the next pasuk, this is Beshalach chapter 14 verse 11, Exodus 14:11, Perek Ydalet pasuk Yud Aleph. They tell Moshe, are there not enough graves in Egypt to take us to die in the desert? What did you do to us to take us out of Egypt? Why would you punish us? Why would you penalize us? Why would you want our lives to end in such disaster? There's not enough graves here. We have to come here to die. We told you in Egypt, leave us alone. and let us serve the Egyptians, because it's much better to be a slave in Egypt than to be a dead man in the desert. So this is really their opening, this is the debut. The moment there is this challenge with Paro, he's coming back, and they're like, let's just go back, let's become slaves. Now Moshe responds to them. And Moshe says, I'm going to read these two psukim, chapter 14 of Shmos, psukim Yud Gimel Yud Dalet, verses 13, 14 in Hebrew, and translate. And I want you to listen to the words and see how the rabbis, the sages, studied a pasuk in such nuance to be able to fully extract all the juice, all the meaning that exists in verses that when you read or hear superficially, you can just gloss over it and think it's just saying that he's saying the same thing in different words. After this tremendous outpouring of emotion, of despair, of frustration, of anger, of pain, and mainly of dread and terror of their impending death, Moshe speaks to the people. Vayomer Moshe Allah, Moshe tells the nation, Hisyatzvu, stand, Uru'u es Yeshuas Hashem asher yasa lechem hayoim, and watch the salvation of God that He will do for you today. Ki asher yisem es Mitzrayim hayoim, lo yisoisifu leroisa moisa madoilo. As you see Egypt today, you will never see them again. Adonai yilochem lachem va'atem tacharish. Hashem will combat, He will fight for your sake, you remain silent. And what is Moshe telling them? He's basically telling them, don't worry. God will take care of you. Everything will be all right. He could have just said, God will fight for you. You will be saved. This is a very nuanced response. Stand, not sit, not lay. Stand, hisyatzvu, stay standing. Stay still and watch the salvation of God. You see Egypt today, you won't see them again. Hashem will fight for you, you remain silent. He seems to be saying the same thing. Everything will be fine. Don't worry about it. You're not going back to Egypt. God will take care of you. You don't have to worry. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to scream. But all these words that he says, almost repetitive, but not quite, because he's saying different expressions, brought the rabbis in the Medrash and the Mechilta, one of the earliest and greatest commentators of the Tanoim, of the Talmudic sages on Chumash Shmos, to explain that there's a subplot that the pasuk is intimating, even though it's not explicit in the verses. Already the Ramban, Nachmanides, who was the great 13th century biblical commentator living in Spain, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman, who was a leader and a rabbi and a sage and a physician and a philosopher and a great commentator, one of the great Goinim and leaders and scholars of the generation, points out a paradox. It says the Jews were frightened, they were terrified when they saw all the Egyptians pursuing them. They lift up their eyes and they see that on one side you have a sea, on the other side you have an army of Egyptian troops. Jews were accustomed being their slaves, so they're terrified. Jews never battled before. They were never an independent nation. They never defended themselves. The plagues in Egypt didn't come from them, came from heaven. Moshe and Aaron brought the plagues as emissaries of the Ribbono Shel Olam. So really they're a nation of slaves, and they see all these equipped and trained troops, and you had the best chariots and horses in Egypt. They're terrified. We can understand that. The next is they scream out to Hashem. In other words, they reach out to God. The next scene is they tell Moshe, are there not enough graves in Egypt yet to take us here to the desert? What do you do? Why are you taking us out? We told you in Egypt, Chadal mimenu, leave us alone. Stop with hopes and dreams of liberty and emancipation. Let us serve the Egyptians. Better to be a slave who's living than to be a dead, free corpse in a desert who's dead. That's what they say. As to Ramban, they scream to God. In other words, they believe that there's a God. They're screaming to Him, they're praying to Him. And then this is what they tell Moshe. You didn't have enough graves in Egypt? Didn't you see what just happened in Egypt? There were 10 plagues. There was Makat B'chayres. You came out of the Egypt. Paro was ultimately crushed and he surrendered. Don't you see what's happening? You reach out to the said God, and then a moment later, you're like, we told you don't take us out of Egypt. Moshe was coming on his own. He was a messenger of Hashem, so don't scream to God. And then a moment later say, this whole God thing is one big circus. And the Ramban concludes and says, you have to say there were different groups. There were different groups. There were those that Vayitzaku al Hashem. One group screamed out to God. Another group, Vayoimru. That's why it says, Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem Vayoimru al Moshe. Another group, another pasuk, another group tells Moshe. Their response is different. They're like, I don't know about this whole God thing. This was a colossal, historic, national error. This is a horrible thing. You subdued us, you seduced us into dreams of liberty, and it's turning out to be one major catastrophe. At the end of the day, we will all end up dead. Different groups responding in different ways. In fact, I saw this in Nechama Leibowitz's book on Chumash. She says, she's always good at these stuff, she says that they repeat the word Mitzrayim 5 times. You know, when you're in love with somebody, you don't stop repeating the name. When you're in love with something, you don't stop talking about it. Whenever you have the same word 5 times in 2 verses, that means the Torah is trying to say, wow, these people are infatuated with this. So if you listen to it, when in English grammar it doesn't make sense. You're not supposed to repeat the same word so many times. And that's why the English translations don't always insert the exact wording to be translated because they want to make it look good. So you miss a lot of the energy that's being conveyed. Vayomer el Moshe, hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim lekachtanu lamas b'midbar amazois asisa lanu loitzeinu b'Mitzrayim. Are there not enough graves in Egypt that you had to take us to die in the desert? Why did you take us out of Egypt? This is what we told you in Egypt. Chadal mimenu v'navdas Mitzrayim. Leave us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. Ki toiv lanu avodas Mitzrayim imesenu b'midbar. Better to serve the Egyptians than die in the desert. 5 times the word Mitzrayim, as though Mitzrayim was the paradise of their youth. The place where everything was perfect, where life was amazing and incredible. And what's the substitute of Mitzrayim? Not, we're going to become a nation. We're going to the land of Israel. We're going to Mount Sinai. We're going back to our homeland. We're going to forge our own destiny. The alternative is, we're going to end up as decomposed corpses in a hot, barren, and infertile desert. 2 groups. But from Moshe's response, the Mechilta says, there were 4 groups. At that moment of crisis, standing between a rock and a hard place, quite literally, between the Yam Suf, the Red Sea on one side, and the Egyptian troops on the other side, the Jewish people split up into Arba Kitos, 4 camps, 4 groups. The first group said, Nipoil Layam, let's jump into the sea and die. Let us not go back and become slaves. We can be tortured. They will be brutal and sadistic to us for leaving. Or we will just live the rest of our lives as slaves, with newborns being plunged into the sea, or whatever other decree the Pare will decide. Forget it. Let's jump into the sea. Enough. Better to die as free men than to live as slaves. One group. Another group says, Nachzal Mitzrayim, let's surrender. We tried, it didn't work. Let's surrender and say, fine, take us back. And we'll go back, we'll be slaves, at least. Maybe we'll live miserably, but we'll live as slaves. The third group says, Nilchem Kenegdon, let's fight. If we lose, we lose. But let's go down fighting and maybe we'll win. Let us fight. Let us battle. The 4th group says, Nitzavach Kenegdon. We have a big God. Let's pray. Now is the time to daven. How do we know there were 4 groups? From Moshe's response. When you hear Moshe's response and you listen carefully, you hear he's not talking to one group. Because if he was talking to one group, He would say one thing and that's it. Don't worry, God will fight for you. Or don't worry, you'll be saved. Or don't worry, you're not going back to Egypt. Or whatever. Or watch God's Yeshua. That's it, you're done. You said what you wanted to say. From all of his words, as you analyze his entire short speech, you see he's addressing 4 different concerns. And it's fascinating, even the approach that somebody could say something 30 seconds, 40 seconds, but he's not addressing one person. He's addressing 4 different types of people. In this case, not 4 people, but hundreds of thousands of different groups of people. Hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people that divided in groups. The first thing Moshe says is, Al tiro, don't be scared. They were all scared. Hisyatzvu uru'us Yeshuas Hashem. Stand still. Satzvu means stand in one place. Remain where you are and watch God's salvation. Then he says, you see Egypt today, you will never see them again. Then he says, God will fight for you. And then he says, Va'atem tacharishna, and you remain silent. Says the Mechilta, he was addressing 4 different groups. The group that said, Nipel ayam, let's jump into the sea. He told them, Hisyatzvu, please, stand still. You're not going anywhere. Just stay where you are, watch the Yeshua. Hisyatzvu, stand still. The group that said, let's surrender, let's go back to Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you see Mitzrayim today, you will never see Mitzrayim ad olam, forever. You're not going back to that cursed country called Mitzrayim, where you have been slaves and tortured and subdued and crushed and dehumanized. You're not going back there again. That's the second group. The third group that said, let's fight. We're a lot of Jews here. You have a few million Jews. Let's fight. Why are we cowards? Why are we victims? Why are we slaves? Hashem yilachem lachem. God will fight for you. The fourth group that said, let's pray. Let's daven. We have a big God. Let him take care of it. V'atem tacharishon. You remain quiet. You remain quiet. So was yeah? What yes? No jumping into the sea. No going back, surrendering. No battling. No combat. And not even prayer. So what's the alternative? Bingo? Boggle? Monopoly? Scrabble? What's the alternative? Kvetch? He said not even kvetching. So was yeah? And don't be scared. This is what Moshe tells them. The next scene, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem tells Moshe, Ma titzak elai. Why are you screaming to me? Daber el bnei Yisrael. Speak to the children of Israel. V'yiso. Let them travel. Let them move forward. That's the first thing he tells them. The next scene is, the next pasuk, and you lift up your stick, extend your hand on the sea, ufka'eyu, and split it, and the Jews will go into the Yam, but it will become dry land. And then he continues, I will strengthen the heart of Paro, he will pursue you, and he will follow the Jewish people into the Yam, and that will be the end of that. That will be the end of the Egyptian slavery. Asks the Ohr Chaim, says, I don't understand. Hashem tells Moshe, why are you screaming to me? Speak to the children of Israel, let them travel. Where are they supposed to travel to? This was their problem. So you're telling me you're going to split the sea. So you should have first said, pick up your stick, extend your hand on the sea, split it, then tell the Jews, travel. That would make sense. They don't know what to do. So you're saying, tell the Jewish people to travel. Thank you. There's a sea. Then he says, pick up your stick and split the sea. The order has to be the opposite. Split the sea and then tell them, move. That's the option. That's not the fifth option. The first thing is you should travel. This option, v'yiso, is a fifth option. Nobody thought of it. There was the first option that said, also travel. But not travel to life, travel to death. Jump into the sea, which is a form of suicide. People can jump into a sea, men, women, and children, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and survive. So when they say Nipa Layam, they're not planning Kriyas Yamsuf. They just say, we don't want to be slaves. Over history, there have been groups. You probably remember the story of the Masada, what happened on Masada, and at different occasions in history among Jews and also non-Jews, where people gave up their lives because they feared their alternative. They said, this is the best option. The best option under the circumstances is death. There were Jews in the concentration camps who killed themselves. They would run over to the barbed wire, to the electrified wires and electrify themselves. The pain of being tortured and dying from hunger or from a beating or from gas, etc. Let me just finish my life. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm going 70 years ago. Every day there are people who choose to die rather than to live because of the enormous pain that they're experiencing with every moment that they are breathing. Sometimes people on the other side don't know the pain they're going through. It's hard for many people to understand what goes through the mind of an 18-year-old or 20-year-old young boy or young girl. And this year, even in this community, there have been quite a few who have done this. What goes into that? What are they experiencing? To reach a conclusion, on some level, I call it a conclusion, that death is far more pleasurable than life. That means that the life is so painful, it is so traumatic, it is so devastating, every moment of it is so hellish, that killing oneself is actually a relief in their own sad perception of things. Sometimes it can happen nationally or a big group. That's the first thing. Nipul Yam, we're going into the Yam. We're not dealing with the Egyptians anymore. That's it. A form of Mesiras Nefesh. We don't want to go be slaves. In many ways you can justify it. God told us, leave Egypt. We can't leave Egypt. They're here to take us. We'll jump into the Yam. There was a glorious side to this proposition. But Moshe, in the name of Hashem, says something else. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yiso. I asked you to go. Go! What does that mean, go? That's the Ohr Chaim's question. What is the meaning of the words? Go where? That's our problem. If we would have where to go, we wouldn't have an issue. We don't have where to go. And if it is a fifth option, why did none of the groups think of it? Why did the Jewish people not split up into 5 groups? They only split up into 4 groups. The truth is that here, in this very analysis, we have a picture of 4 different responses that each of us are capable of making when we are faced with our own adversity in life. When you or I stand between the rock and the hardball, between our own sea that seems colossal and endless, and there's nowhere to go but if I jump to my death, and behind me, all these troops that want me enslaved. How do I respond? Yes, for some of us the choice is not Egyptians and the Red Sea. Probably most of you sitting here have not been to Egypt. I once got an offer from somebody a few years ago to come spend Pesach on a cruise in the Yam Suf, in the Red Sea. And he said, imagine Rabbi Jacobson, Shvi Shal Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach, which is when Kriyas Yam Suf happened. You'll say the Shira and you'll give your sermon in the place, you'll be able to point and say, here's where it happened. I said, I'm happy to do it with one condition. If you can guarantee me that Shvi Shal Pesach, as I speak, the sea splits, and somebody could put it on WhatsApp, we can get a Gentile to put it on WhatsApp, then I'm coming. Could you guarantee that? He says, no. I said, okay, I'll celebrate Kriyas Yam Suf in my heart. It'll be a little easier for me. At such a moment in every person's life, there are moments when we feel stuck. Every person in their own way, every person with their own challenges. It may be personal, it may be familial, it may be spiritual, it may be financial, it may be physical, it may be chemical, maybe mental, psychological. And sometimes a combination of a few. It may be the past, it may be the present, it may be worry for the future, which we're very good at. How do we respond? How do you respond in such a situation? The 4 groups are 4 prototypes. They are 4 psychological models of how people respond in the face of adversity, whether it's tremendous adversity or maybe smaller adversity, but for them it's serious. It's a subjective, whether it's subjective or objective, but how does a person respond to this? One group says, let's jump into the sea. That's one type of person. Another type of person, let's go back to Egypt. Another one says, I'm going to fight. And the other one says, I'm just going to pray. And God tells to Moshe, no, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yiso. I need you to travel. I need you to move forward. That's what I need from you. What are these 4 approaches? And what is the 5th approach? That's why I asked you in the beginning, are you an escapist? Are you a conformist? Are you a fighter? Or are you passive? So I'm going to give one general outline of this, but as always in these cases, it's extremely nuanced and could be applied in so many different situations, and even can be explained in different models and different wordings and different structures and different algorithms. But here's the general outline, a sketch of what these 4 approaches represent in their core, and then each one can see how it relates to them. One approach is Nipalayam. In many ways, it's a very powerful one. It sounds very innocent and very pure. Nipalayam physically means let's jump into the sea. But what does it represent? It means I don't want to deal with problems anymore. Over. I'm going to retreat into isolation. I'm going to go into a cocoon. I'm going to go into the concealment. I'm going to hide forever. That way I won't make any problems and nobody will make any problems for me. I will become an invisible person. Anybody relates to this? That's it. I'll cut off my ties. I'll cut off my connections. You don't bother me. I don't bother you. You're not upset at me. I'm not upset at you. That's it. I sever the cords of the relationships that are anxious, that are causing me anxiety and pain. I become an invisible person. Invisible to others and sometimes even invisible to myself. I literally go undercover. You join the witness protection program. Sometimes it sounds like a very spiritual alternative. There's an expression in Svarim, Yam HaTfilah, the ocean of prayer, Yam HaTorah, the ocean of Torah, Mayim Shein Lem Soif. I'm going to Mol Ha'aretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Layam Echasim, a mikveh. I'm going to jump into a mikveh forever. Yes, you can't physically survive under a mikveh for too long, but that's the point. I don't want to be connected to the environment. I don't want to be connected. There's too much corruption. There's too much politics. There's too much pain. There's too much abuse. There's too many issues. There's too many problems. I like underwater. I'm going to live underwater, if not physically, emotionally. I'm going to retreat into my own space and disconnect, and that's where there is purity. Like underwater, it's a place of purity. It's a place of silence. Somehow the fish don't get on my nerves. V'yidgu l'roiv. I'm fine with the fish, if I can only be a fish underwater. One approach. We call it in English escapism. I escape situations. There's another approach. Nachzal Mitzrayim. Surrender. Just surrender. Lower your standards. Give up on dreams. Give up on who you are. Just make peace with the reality. The reality is the Egyptians are very, very powerful. You have always been a slave to them. You tried to become free. It worked for like 6.5 days. Okay, that's not made for you. Egypt is too strong. Just go back. Be a little good boy. Be a little good girl. Surrender to mediocrity. Resign to politics. Surrender to living a life of quiet desperation. But what are you going to do? You can't fight City Hall. You can't fight the world. You can't be so much in pain. Just mutilate a part of yourself, mutilate a part of your mind, mutilate a part of your heart, become half blind, half deaf, cut off part of your personality, and just give in. Are you going to be a slave for the rest of your life? Okay, you'll be a living slave. But you know what? You'll have the value of the protection that a slave has. Somebody else thinks for you. Somebody else tells you what to do. Somebody else feeds you. And that's it. And you know, you won't make any waves. Pun intended. You won't jump into the waves and you won't make any waves. You'll just go back to a place without waves and you'll be a slave for life. There's a third approach in life. The third approach is, I'm not running. And I'm not surrendering. I will fight. And for the next 68 years, I fight. I fight with everybody. I fight with my family. I fight with my siblings. I fight with my community. I fight with whoever I could fight with. In fact, I wake up in the morning and I wonder, who am I going to fight with today? I'm a fighter. I don't surrender. I don't retreat. I fight. This is what I dedicate my life to. I combat myself and I combat others. They say that some Jews like to fight. I heard from Eli Wiesel, Olav Shalom. He said, Jews like to fight, but they're sophisticated, so they give their fights a sophisticated name. They fight with the world and they call it sociology. They fight with God and they call it theology. They fight with themselves, they call it psychology. Whatever the right name is, this is a combatant person. Is the one who's fighting injustice, the one who's fighting corruption, the one who's fighting an avla. It's a person who's dedicated to milchama. And then there's a fourth approach. And the fourth approach seems mamish the most sweet and holy and Jewish. Fourth approach says, you know what? This is not my world. This is God's world. It's His problem. I'm just going to pray. I'll pray. I'll pray for me. I'll pray for everybody. This is what I'm going to do. And let Hashem make the decisions and run the show. All I do is I daven. That's my response. I have an issue with my kids, I daven. I have an issue with my husband, I daven. I have an issue with my family, I daven. I have an issue with myself, I daven. I have an issue with this, I daven. I just daven, I pray. As you can guess, each one of these perspectives has tremendous legitimacy to it. These are not four perspectives. It's not black and white that are wrong and one is right. Each one of them has a truth to it. In fact, each one of them has its time and its place. Each one of them, there is room for it. And yet, in this situation, all of them were wrong. So Moshe responds and he says, Hisyatzvu, don't run into your cocoon. Don't surrender to Egypt. Don't start becoming a combatant and fighting for the rest of your journey. And even prayer, as Hashem told Moshe, Matitzak Elai, what does Rashi say? Powerful words. Haya Moshe oimedu mespalel amalek kadosh baruch hu lo yeisata la'arich b'tfilah sheYisrael nesunim b'tzara. Jews are in a problem. It's not time to daven long. What do you mean? When the people are in a tzara, you should daven. Interesting Rashi. He says, Laharich b'tfilah. Don't now dedicate the rest of the time. Now you only daven because people are in a tzara. What's the approach? Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yisol. I want you to move forward. But there's a sea. Thank you. What does that mean? That's like the first group. Let's jump into the sea. No, he doesn't say jump into the sea. He says v'yisol. You travel. Then he tells Moshe, by the way, I want you to take your stick and split the sea. Oh, thank you. Should have said that first, like Ohr Chaim asks. But here we actually are privy to the divine approach, to Hashem's approach, that none of the four picked up on. Because all of the four were trying to figure everything out. They were trying to settle all of the issues and try to win the chess game through their own methodology and calculations. And in our mind, we live in polarity. So either I retreat, I run, or I surrender, I give up. Just give up, I lose. I let you win. Right? People do it a lot. They do it in marriages. They do it in other situations. You just surrender and, And that's it. It's quiet. You don't tell anybody about what's going on. It's all under the rug. Or other situations. You see it with abused victims sometimes. You surrender, you're quiet, and Alts is good, Alts is shame. The main thing is it looks good, it's good for the pictures, everybody is smiling, and you go to your grave with your pain and nobody knows anything. And the world goes on, and you're considered a wonderful person, and the fact that you were quiet is even better, etc. That's another approach. Also, it's a way of figuring out the world. And the third approach is I'm going to fight. It's another way of figuring out the world. I'm going to make things right through my fighting. And the fourth approach is I'm also going to make things right by giving it over to God. God, you play chess. I don't play chess. I'll say Tehillim and you do the chess game. This is a complicated chess game. I'm not an expert. You're the expert. I'll pray. I'll do the prayer. You're the expert. The Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu at this moment, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yisa'u. Move forward. What does this mean? I gave you a mission. I told you in Egypt, when you're going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, you're destined to go to a mountain. Mount Sinai, Har Sinai. This is what Hashem told Moshe all the way in the beginning when he met him at the burning bush. You're going to take them out of Egypt and go to the mountain. Did you reach the mountain yet? No, that is your destination. From Mitzrayim, you're going to Har Sinai, where you're going to receive your spiritual mandate, the blueprint to become a nation, a kingdom of princes, and a holy nation, Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, to change the world and turn the world into a divine abode, to turn the world l'sakin oilam b'malchus shindalad yud. You're on a mission. You're on a destination. Move forward. If I gave you a shlichus, I gave you a mission to go to Har Sinai, go. I have given you, trust me, I know who I sent. I have given you all the resources. I have given you all the tools. I have given you all the faculties, all the skills, all the gifts, all the talents, all the koiches, all the chushin, and the challenges for you to be able to fulfill your destination where I, who created you, sent you. Move forward. You tell me, what do you mean move forward? There's nowhere to move. That you let me decide. Leave that up to me. I gave you a mission. You don't have to figure out the end game, and you don't have to figure out all of the nuances of how everything is going to fit together. Sometimes you may see it, sometimes you won't see it. But you have a mission. Don't question your mission, and don't question, more importantly, your power to reach your destination, to reach your life goal, to reach your mountain, to reach your promised land. Your approaches move forward. What does this mean in a person's life? A person is facing a challenge, whatever that type of challenge may be. I could start enumerating, but it'll be faster if everybody just thinks about things they had to deal with or have to deal with. There is an approach where we just like, I had enough of these people. Bye-bye, bye-bye. We sever the cords to everybody. But by severing the cords to everybody, we also sever the cords to a certain part of ourselves. Because we're not fish under the sea. I mean, sometimes it's nice. It's nice to go scuba diving for half an hour. And spend time there and imagine you were a fish, right? But at some point, you got to come back up. And the world of dry land is very different than the world of the sea. It's not an invisible world here. Here, everything is visible. The beauty of the Yam is you see nothing, right? Imagine you could walk around on dry land and nobody would see you. You wouldn't even see yourself. In many ways, it's easier. There's no self-consciousness. That's the craving, the yearning to go under the Yam. But we're visible to ourselves, we're visible to other people. So that concept of let me retreat, let me go into isolation, let me segregate. There used to be an expression, a tzaddik in pelts. You know what that is? A tzaddik in a large fur coat. When it's freezing outside, it's a good New York January, February winter. Or better, a Siberian, Russian January, February winter. There are places in Siberia where you reach 70, 80 minus below zero. Okay, that's called a cold. What do? So one approach is atzadik and pelts. You put on a fur coat, but not just those fur coats. You know those nice big, for the pictures, they're very nice. A lot of the Rebbes have these coats. I'm thinking of getting one of them. It's like those, you know what I'm talking about? They're very nice for the pictures. They walk and it looks very warm. I like my coat, but it looks, for the pictures, it looks very warm and nice. And you put on one of these fur coats and you're warm. It's beautiful. But you know what else? You know what? Everybody else remains cold. There's another approach, and the approach is to light a fire. And when you light a fire, you remain warm, and everybody around you remains warm. So there is an approach. I'm going to go in to my fur coat, where I'm very comfortable, where I'm also invisible, where I don't have to deal with anything, and where I'm very, very holy. This is an approach sometimes of a very lofty person, of a very sensitive person. This is not about corruption. This is sometimes a very sensitive approach. In another way it could be, I just want to retreat. It's too painful. I can't face my fears. I can't face these people. I cannot sit down at a conversation. You say, why don't you talk it over with this person? Why don't you call them up and say, let's go out and talk about this? I cannot do this. It's much easier to cut myself off, and 60 years later, maybe we'll meet at our great-grandchild's bar mitzvah. Until then, that's it. Nipalayam, I just cannot deal. This is Egypt for me. This is slavery. This is pain. This is anxiety. This is abuse. Don't take me there. Sorry, I can't do it. I'm not going to face it. The other approach is, also don't face it. It's very similar. I surrender. I don't retreat at all. I just make believe everything is good and I live like a slave. A slave means I don't live with who I really am. I cut out my core self and I just do what other people want me to do. Anybody can relate to this? I do what other people, I become almost like a robot. What is a slave? A slave is a robot. A slave is a person who cannot choose his or her life, cannot choose his or her dreams, cannot live life to the fullest. I cannot be with me. I have to ask you every morning, what do I do today? You tell me, and if I don't, I get whipped. Depends on my master. Sometimes you have a benign master, sometimes you have a creepy master. But the point is, I become a slave in life. And many of us, even as we live in this world, in the free world, the mentality is one that I'm not fully in touch with myself. I surrender and I mutilate me and I just become part of somebody else's expectations. What is the word in Tanakh for purgatory? For Gehenna, for hell? Anybody remembers? Yes, Sha'ol. Sha'ol Tachtis, right. Sha'ol. Yaakov Avinu said, I'm going to go down to Sha'ol. Sha'ol is like the abyss, the grave. What is deep, deep down under? I don't mean Australia. I mean even under Australia. Australia is a nice place. Sha'ol. Sha'ol is the deep, deep down under spiritually. Gehenna, purgatory, is called Sha'ol Tachtis. What's the meaning of this word? The word Sha'ol has another meaning. What's the other meaning of Sha'ol? Comes from the word Sha'ul. What is Sha'ul? Borrowed. When I live a borrowed life, I'm living in purgatory. The definition of Gehenna, of Gehenna is what? Not some big barbecue fire that's going to consume you and obliterate you and destroy you. How can fire, people think Gehenna has huge barbecues with fires burning, and God says, okay, we're going to now roast this soul and put some barbecue sauce in, and some mustard, and some sauerkraut, and some steak sauce, and some chicken sauce, and some chili sauce, and a bissel vinegar, a bissel salz. This is going to be a geschmolz and a geschmackessude. This is what people hear, and I ask a person, I don't understand. How can a soul, which is spiritual, be affected by fire? Gehenna, when we learn about Gehenna, whatever you learned about, it's all metaphors for certain concepts. The key definition of Gehenna is Sha'ul. I live a borrowed life. I live a life that is not true to who I really, really am. And sometimes I feel I have to do it, maybe at a very young age, maybe unconsciously. Some of us at the age of 4 or 5 or 6, we check out. We check out from ourselves. Sometimes a child will say, I don't have these emotions, because a father told me that his son told him, his teenage son told him, you are Hitler, and you're not my father. Those were his words. The father's instinct was to slap him in his face. Get out of my house, you don't speak to your father like that. When the father reflected a little deeper on what happened, with the help of somebody who was wise and perceptive, he said, I want you to understand, was this child your most sensitive and emotional child, or your least sensitive and emotional child? As is usual the case, it was his most sensitive and emotional child. So how do you think your most sensitive and emotional child would speak like this? Perhaps the pain of him not having a father and not feeling that he has a father is too deep. So the way to deal with that pain, how do you numb that pain? He could sit down with his father and say, I wish you could get close to me. But whoa, that takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of courage. There's an easier way to do it. The Klippedika way of doing it, the Gehenim way of doing it, and that is, I don't need a father. I don't need you. But how can I not need you? He's my father. He's an evil person. Why would I need an evil person? So this is all a symptom of a deep craving for closeness and for connection. The depth of the connection is what produces the depth of the disconnection. The more the lost dream, the greater the anger, the pain, and the loneliness, and therefore the frustration and the outburst of negative emotion. But it's hard sometimes to see this. Sometimes at a very young age we check out. I can't deal with what is going on. In other words, and I decide I'm going to live as an Eved, I'll live as an Egyptian slave. Sha'oil, I'm going to live a borrowed life. You tell me what to do and I do it. I've told you once, we're all born originals, many of us die as copies. There's a reason for it. In many ways it's easier. Slavery has some good stuff about it. I agree with Abraham Lincoln on what he did. I'm glad that all slaves were freed. We were also freed a few thousand years ago. But there is a certain temptation in somebody else living your life for you. You don't think, you don't know. I was once in Florida, in Palm Beach for a Shabbaton. So I met a couple celebrating their 60th anniversary. So at the table I said, Mazel Tov, we have a couple, sister. I said, wow, I asked the husband, tell us the secret. 60 years and you're still on speaking terms. And you even seem happy. So he says, it's one secret, for 60 years I've been half blind and half deaf. So I asked the woman, now tell us that's very romantic, but now let's hear from the woman, from your perspective, like really? And I thought we'll hear something a little more intelligent, a little more insightful maybe, a little more perceptive about relationships. And she says, for 60 years I've been completely blind and completely deaf. That's how we did it. Okay, great. If only. So, when a person reaches this state, they say, I'm just surrendering. I can't fight. This is what it is. And stop creating expectations for reality. Why do I have to borrow my life? There's a second word. Sha'oil tachtis. Because I feel like I'm on the bottom. When I feel like I'm on the bottom, I have to borrow my life. I feel like I'm too weak. A slave has to be told what to do. I'm too weak. I'm incompetent. I don't have the courage. I don't have the strength. I don't have the energy. There's the little demon in me that tells me you're on the bottom. You're tachtis. You belong on the bottom. You know, in those amusement parks, you remember there's that game where things jump up and you have to shoot them down? What are they called? It's a geschmacke game. The kids like it and the adults like it even more. You know, these people, they pop up and you got to shoot them down, and another one pops up, you got to shoot them down. Some people live that life. You whack them down, you whack them down, you shoot them down, whatever it is. Some people live that life. The moment they popped up from the sha'oil, whack down. The moment they had an opinion, Rebist, who are you to have opinions? Boom. The moment they expressed an emotion, it went nowhere. So what happens? It's much easier to stay down. To duck, just live like this. You know, when bullets are being shot, what do they tell you? Duck, fall down to the ground. Some people stay there. They duck and they never come up. There's no bullets already 50 years. But in their perception, it doesn't matter. Because when they were 6, there were bullets, at least in their own mind. So for the rest of their life, they duck. And you say, where are you? Can I see you? Sorry, I can't get up. Physically, I may be standing, but psychologically, I'm not standing. I go back to Egypt. There's a third approach. The third approach seems very nice. I'm going to fight. I'm not running anywhere. and I'm not surrendering. I will fight. You know what happens? People who the rest of their life are fighting. They're fighting. Every day they call somebody else to tell them about the fight of yesterday. It's a life of combat, a life of conflict. And I'm always right. These people are unjust. Did you hear what she did by the Shevat Brachas? I made a Shevat Brachas 4 weeks ago. I invited her 11 kids, and her 60 bratty grandchildren. She makes a Shevat Brachas. The prima donna, Miss America Tzatska. Yeah. You would think my kids would get an invitation, etc. And people sometimes live their whole life, and they're busy, and then the whole world knows about it. Even I have to find out about it. Sometimes people live in perpetual conflict and anger and fighting with this one, and it's all for and sometimes they're right too. They're not always wrong. Somebody once told me, just because I'm paranoid, it doesn't mean the whole world is not out to get me. Sometimes the cause may be right. I'm going to fight and combat and conflict. People who love demonstrations. They love making in shuls. You have always people who love making machas. They come to life when you could bury somebody. There was once a guy I knew, we always make a macha. He would always stand up and bang on the bimah and make a macha. I say, it's so interesting. Why do you never get up at the bimah and stop? You know what? This person needs a favor. Maybe we could, why do you never do it? Zaycha mitzvah. Zaycha mitzvah. He says, because this is my shlichus in the world. My mission in the world is to bagrabn. Why is that your mission in the world? Because it's coming from a detachment from your true power, your true connection to God. If you're really connected, at least both should be equivalent. And love should be a little more easier than hate. So what happens sometimes is a person that the focus of their life becomes not combat, conflict, negativity. Because I'm facing Egypt. You're fighting a good cause. The problem is not the cause. The problem is that you're always fighting. And anybody who in life is always fighting is not building. And the purpose of life is to build, not to fight. Sometimes you got to fight, but that's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is not to argue and fight. The purpose of life is to build. Sometimes when people have no life, this becomes a substitute purpose. And it's very sad. It's a certain type of notion. It's a certain type of psychology. There's no peace. There's no serenity. There's no wholesomeness. It also has to do with one's spiritual understanding of Judaism. Imagine there's a palace. In the palace there's a king and a queen. But the palace has to be protected. Because enemy forces could come in and destroy the palace and exterminate the people in the palace and ruin the palace. So you have to have guards outside of the palace protecting the palace. Very often, and I say this with sensitivity and respect, but I want us to understand the message. Very often, sometimes, some of us, some communities, some people, we've educated generations. What is our job? Our job is to stand outside of the palace and make sure that nobody gets close to the palace. Because if, God forbid, enemy forces get close to the palace, the purity and the royalty and the holiness and the sanctity of the palace could be compromised. So the whole focus of Judaism became, we are the protectors of the palace. You know what the challenge is? There are children who don't know what's inside the palace. What am I protecting? Every day you give me another edict to protect something else in the palace. This is from the Goyim, and this is from the world, and this is from Tumah, and this is from Chayil, and this can't come to our community, and this Bayirah Bal Yamotzi, and this is Chametz, and this has to be burnt, and this has to be forgotten, and this is, and it's all nice. It may be beautiful and glorious, but your teenage son or daughter is saying, what am I protecting? You're telling me that you don't want the Tumah and the Goyim to come and destroy the king and the queen. Give me a taste of the king and the queen that I'm protecting. Give me a taste of the divine that I'm protecting. Give me a taste of my soul that I'm protecting. Give me a taste of an intimate experience with God that I'm protecting. You can't just tell me my whole life is all about protecting, that the negative foes and the destructive enemies don't get into the palace, let me come in and see what is it that I'm fighting for. And sometimes, as he or she grows up, their entire mission statement in life is, I'm just fighting. For what? For whom? Is there an end? What's the purpose? Let's put it this way. If Judaism had no obstacles, what would it be? What can excite us if there's nothing to fight off? If there's nothing, imagine there's nothing to aser. It's soon going to be, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be nothing to aser. What are people going to do? Does anybody know? What is Judaism going to look like? I'm wondering. B'karev mamish, Mashiach is going to come. We say every day, Ani mam and achakalei b'chol yom sheyava. There's going to be nothing to aser. Can you imagine? V'esruach hatuma avim and oretz. There won't be pritzes. There won't be tumah. The internet will have only my classes. And hopefully some other good people. I don't want to be perceived as so narcissistic. Okay. The iPhone will have only my WhatsApps. Maybe another few WhatsApps. I don't know. But not stam holy. Altaris HaKodesh. Kodesh Kadosh. There won't be what to aser, Rabbi Yisai. Nothing. Esruach hatuma avim and aretz. V'nigla kvoid Hashem. The covered glory of God will be revealed. What is Judaism going to be then? Boring, right? What are they going to do by you guys? What are they going to do? You're going to have to discover what's in the palace. That's what you have to discover today. Not that you don't need guards. People like to pluck out for my speeches 2.5 minutes, send it viral, to prove that Rabbi YY is whatever. I'll let you finish the sentence. Countries need protection. Palaces need protection. Homes need protection. The larger the palace, the more beautiful the palace, the more protection it needs. But the protection is a means to protect what is inside the palace. The focus is what's inside the palace. The joy, the enjoyment, the experience of what's inside. And therefore, you want to protect it. On the contrary, the greater the palace, the more the protection. So those who speak more about protection have to speak much more about what's inside the palace. Often people who speak all day about protection don't even know that there's a palace or what's inside. Don't krechcha, don't worry. We spoke about the groups. Don't start signing. That's not one of that's not the fifth option. The fifth option is not the krechcha. You understand why? Vayiso is never to kvetch. You never kvetch. You kvetch as a hobby. It's important to have hobbies, to have outlets. So by Jews, it's kvetching. That's the hobby. But it's not how you live your life. You need a kvetch, fine, 45 minutes a day. Go into your closet and kvetch. You know, they say what a Jewish telegram looks like. You remember the telegrams, Olav Shalom, the good old telegrams that you got for your wedding? Mazel Tov, right? They say, a Jewish telegram, start worrying, details to follow. Mitzrayim needs to be defeated. But if I spend my life in the philosophy of I'm busy combating, I'm squandering the most important time and energy on that which is important, but it's an accessory. It's not the core. And besides, my life becomes defined by the enemy. My life becomes, all my life becomes about is what you're doing, because I'm busy fighting. Then there's the fourth approach. The fourth approach is like a really beautiful approach. You're not running, and you're not surrendering and giving in and forfeiting your soul and your God and your identity, and you're not even combative. On the contrary, you tell Hashem, listen, it's dein Welt. My job is to daven. But sometimes this is also the wrong approach, because that is based on the idea that we are all victims. We don't have the resources. We don't have the tools. God sent us on a mission, but we often can't do it. And all we have to do is tell God, I know you created me, and I know you gave me a lot of koiches. Here, everything is back. You do it. You know what I'll do? I'll daven. Now, davening is very powerful, because davening is the connection between the person and Hashem. And that connection is what fuels life. But that connection is supposed to fuel life, not take you away from life. That connection is supposed to be able to empower me, that I'm a co-partner with the master of the world to heal the world. But we're partners. The Gemara has an expression, Shutaf LaHakadosh Baruch Hu kol ha'omer vayechulu. When you celebrate Shabbos, you become a Shutaf LaHakadosh Baruch Hu b'maaseh bereishis. You become a partner. Now, what's the definition of a partner in a business? One person does the business, the other one prays. That's not Shutfus. Shutfus means we work together to fix the world. You created the world, and I'm going to fix it up. It needs a few touches. Shutaf LaHakadosh Baruch Hu. So when a person says, all I'm going to do is give a good krech, which is a form of tefillah, the Rosh Gaon once said, a krech von Ayidin is tshuva elah. A Jew gives a sigh. It's the highest level of tshuva. It's a very deep level of tefillah because it comes from the depth of the heart. So that's tefillah. But then the person says, I have the resources. Don't absolve yourself. Don't exonerate yourself. Don't believe you're in a state of paralysis and stagnation and you have to shrug your shoulders and say, like this. There's people who live their whole life like this. Nothing I can do, sorry. Call somebody else, sorry. I'll daven, give me the names, I'll daven. Davening is gewaldig. But sometimes I have to take my talis and tefillin, pack it up, und gehen spalten ayam, and go on a journey forward. And with our own challenges and obstacles as well. I could be passive and say there's nothing I can do. Sometimes that's the truth. Sometimes in life there's unique moments when that's the time to pray and nothing else. There's unique moments, it's time to fight. There's unique moments, you got to retreat. And there's unique moments where you have to appreciate what the reality is and understand what reality demands of you now according to God's will. There's such things. In other words, I could say I'm surrendering, or I could say I'm not surrendering. They once asked Napoleon, he was fighting, and he was getting very close. I'm sorry, not Napoleon. They say it about General Patton, I think I read it. And he told his soldiers to start going in the other direction. So somebody said, General Patton, we're retreating? He said, no, we're advancing in the opposite direction. That's the difference. If I'm advancing in the opposite direction, sometimes there's a need for that. But at a moment, what's the general outlook of the Jew? There's a moment to retreat and go into your own Dalet Amos. There's a moment to fight, and there's a moment to daven, and there's a moment to appreciate reality and advance in the other direction and not stop being action and stubborn. And every day there's a moment for that. Every day there's all the four types, every single day. In the morning is a time of complete davening. A person goes to Hashem. And there's moments of the day where I really, what we call downtime, what some people call downtime, I call it uptime, where you really retreat into your own core. And you spend time with your soul, with your God, with your true core. Beyond anything around you. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is not to put on a fur coat. You sometimes need a fur coat, especially in these weathers. The purpose is to light a fire. If you don't have a coat, you may not have the energy to light a fire, but the purpose is to light a fire. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yiso. In every situation in life, there are the four options, and then there's God's option. God's option is move forward. Advance to your destination. You want a beautiful marriage? Create it. You want a beautiful relationship with your children? Work on it. Yes, there will be a sea in front of you, Egyptians behind you, and they'll scream, you're dead, you're finished, your life is finished. Don't try to calculate and figure everything out. Advance. Every day, advance. Without fear. First words Moshe says is, Al tiro. Roosevelt was right when he said we have nothing to fear but fear. Fear is at the core of all the other four approaches. I'm frightened and therefore I have to figure it out. Don't be afraid. You do what you're capable of doing. God put you on this world. You have a chelek Eloikam imal mamish. You're a piece of the divine and therefore you're invincible. You're infinite. Shlucha shalodam kamaisa. You're his ambassador. You have divine power to confront every situation and to move forward. And you know what will happen? Suddenly you will see if there's a sea, it will split. And other obstacles will move away. And things you thought were insurmountable will suddenly fly away. You say, well, how did that happen? You don't have to worry about that. Moshe will pick up a stick and God will take care of that. My job is not to doubt my mission and my power to fulfill my mission, whatever that mission is I have in this world. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yiso. Don't look down, don't look right, don't look left, don't look back. Don't even look up. Look ahead. Look ahead and move there and travel there. And every day take another step there. And for that, you have to stop kvetching. You have to stop thinking like a paralyzed person. You have to stop trying to figure out how all the puzzles will come into place. Don't give up on life and run. Don't dedicate a philosophy of fighting. I'll prove them wrong, I'll be right. Don't go there. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, you deserve better than that. Don't spend your life fighting. And don't become passive and say, I just can't do anything, I'm a Nebuch case, Hashem will have to do everything. You're not a Nebuch case, that word should be obliterated from Jewish culture. You're not a Nebuch and you're not a victim, you're a Shutaf LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Maaseh Bereishis. And the Pasuk says in Malachi, the last prophet that we ever had, the beginning of Bayesheni, the last sefer of Tanakh, Malachi, Ani Hashem lo shanisi v'atem b'nei Yaakov lo chilisam. I, God, have not changed, and you, the children of Jacob, will never cease to be. Just like I'm eternal, you will be eternal. And that's including not just Klal Yisrael, but every individual. There's a koyach of nitzchius. There's a power of eternity. A power that is invincible in the core of the human soul and the human spirit. No rock and no hardball can destroy it. The problem is the rock and the hardball start defining me. And I either surrender to the rock or I become entrenched in the hardball, in the ocean or the Egyptians, and then all my strategies become convoluted. My sole strategy is v'yiso. I gotta get to my promised land. I gotta get to my Mount Sinai. L'sakin oilam b'malchus shindalad. This is true as an individual, it's true as a Klal Yisrael, it's true in Jewish history, and it's true also in every person's individual life in terms of the goals, the dreams, and the ambitions that God has entrusted with each and every mother, with each and every human being, with each and every father, mother, husband, wife, human being, Jew, young and old, woman and man, child or older person, every person with their mountain. Sometimes, in the middle of a class, a thought comes to me. Well, not sometimes, always. In the middle of a class, thoughts come to me. Most of the time I don't say them because I don't feel they belong. Sometimes I doubt, should I say it, should I not say it? Should I go there, should I not go there? Will I get in trouble, will I not get in trouble? Will people get upset, will people not get upset? Will I have to jump into the sea afterwards? Will I have to surrender and apologize to Egypt afterwards? Will I have to start praying for the rest of my life? Will I have to start fighting for the rest of my life? So I don't know. Will people misinterpret it? Will people misconstrue it? Okay, so these are things, I try to figure out to the best of my ability. Sometimes I'm on target, sometimes I'm really not on target, sometimes I err, sometimes I don't err, and I always try to learn from my mistakes. Last week, I gave a shir, if you remember, last week was Parshas Boy. What did I talk about? Du gedenkst? No, that's the week before. Huh? Oh. Yes. I didn't talk about skiing. That came into my head. What did I talk about? What was the class about? I know that's the clip, huh? Ataza. Moshe spoke about you're going to have rebellious children and they all bow down in joy, which doesn't seem to make sense. So we spoke about what was the real message of Moshe Rabbeinu, who your rebellious children are going to be, and for this the Jewish people were very joyous. So a day before, somebody sent me a story by email, a Jew from Antwerp. I didn't know if it fits in, and should I say, and I knew different people have different perspectives, and I knew about the aftermath. Should I say it, should I not say it? And then I decided I'm going to move forward, v'yisol. I'm going to tell the story. I told the story about finding your child's soul on the ski slopes. I mean, that's how I summarized the story about the old Baba Rebbe, the Kedusha Sion, who was murdered by the Nazis, Hashem Yinkim Dam, in the beginning of the Second World War, from Galicia, from Bobov, which is eastern Poland, close to in the area of the Carpathian Mountains. I told the story in detail. I heard that it went around. I personally don't have WhatsApp. I have a lot of guards around my palace. So I actually don't have WhatsApp, believe it or not. Right, that's why I don't have WhatsApp. And but I heard from a lot of people, you said this, you said that, you said that. So 2 days ago, a Jew called me. His name is Ohr Chaim from Borough Park. And he says, you told a story about my father. But the person who told you the story didn't have the details accurate. So he said 95% of the story was accurate, 5% of the story was inaccurate. And I'm going to tell you the story the way I heard it from my father himself, because he is the Bala Maisa. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Hersh Zieger. When he was born, when he was a young child, his father contracted typhus, and his father died. And the day after Shiva, his mother died, because she contracted typhus from the father. So he had nobody, so his grandfather took him into the house, and he was what we would call a very challenging child. So he went to the Sadiger Rebbe. He was a Sadiger Chassid. So the Ger Rebbe said, I heard that in Bobov, the Bobov Rebbe is matzliach very much with such students. Why don't you send him to Rebbe Tzvi in Halberstam, Rebbe Tzvi in Bobov? This is in the 1930s. Why don't you send him there? And Reb Chaim tells me this was a chiddush, because if you're familiar, Tzanz and Bobov, seine nicht ausgekommen, but he understood, which is also a lesson, he knew he's a Sadiger Rebbe, and Bobov was really off limits for Sadiger at that time, but he understood that you have to think about your child, somebody's child, more than other cheshbonos. Yaakov Hersh was 7 when he lost both of his parents. He was 16 when his grandfather sends him to Bobov, a bacher, an orphan, alone in Bobov. The Bobov Rebbe sees this boy crying, so he asks his Gabbai, Reb Chatzkel Rottenberg, to find out what's going on. So he finds out he's a Yosim and he just came here and he has nobody here. So the Bobov Rebbe said, I'm going to daven Shachris, and after that tell him to please come to my home to eat breakfast with me. No, so the boy is taken to the Bobov Rebbe for breakfast, and he said the Bobov Rebbe himself took a piece of bread and smeared butter on it for the boy, and he fed him, and he asked him a story, and the kid was crying and sobbing. And the Bobov Rebbe asked him why his grandfather sent him. He sent me here to learn. But he said, I don't want to be here, I want to be home. So the Bobov Rebbe took out money and said, here is money, so you could go on the train and go back home if you want. But tell me what sports you like. What sports you like? Are there any sports you like? And he starts going through different sports that were known in Eastern Europe. And the kid says, no, nothing is interesting to me. Bobov Rebbe says, was is mit glitschen auf der Schnee? What about skiing? He says, yeah, this I love. This I would cherish. The Bobov Rebbe calls 2 older Bachrim, and he says, take him to the Carpathian Mountains and let him become an expert skier. And he offers this to him. And he says, yes, I want to learn. I love skiing and I want to learn how to ski. And that's when the Baba Rebbe said, good, this is going to be useful for you. And these two boys took him to the Carpathians. They taught him how to become an expert skier. And he became a wonderful bacher in the yeshiva. As I said, during the war years, he was in one of the ghettos, and the sadistic SS would try to experiment with different things to torture Jews. And one frigid morning, 4:30 in the morning, they took them up to a slope, and they sent them down the slope, and they said, whoever makes it can survive. Whoever can't get up will be shot on the spot. Most, even if they made it down to the bottom, surviving was very hard to get up. They broke an arm, they broke a leg, they were wounded, they were paralyzed, whatever the situation was, and they were killed on the spot. And he said, my father told me, Rabbi Yaakov Hersh told me I was on top of the slope. It was my turn. And at that moment, he said, for the first time and last time during the Holocaust, I saw the Baba Rebbe, the Kedusha Sion, who was already killed, in front of my eyes. Like I had a vision right in front of him. And he told me, I told you it's going to be useful for you, it's going to be beneficial for you. Don't worry. You're a skier, you'll make it down the slope. And he went down on the bottom. He maneuvered, it was of course without skis. He maneuvered himself and he made it to the bottom and he survived. He survived the war. He was for 6 years by the Germans, 6 years. The last years of Auschwitz he was there too, and he was liberated from Auschwitz in 1945. And he ultimately made it to America. He moved to the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn with the Baba Rebbe, the son of the Kedusha Sion, Reb Shlomo Halberstam. Baba Rebbe lived, I believe, on Crown Street until he moved to Borough Park after Shavuos 1967, and he Baba v'Chasidim here. After Shavuos 1967, Rabbi Yaakov Hersh Zieger had a grocery store on Empire Boulevard between Brooklyn and New York Avenue in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, near a shul called Empire Stiebel. It's a grocery store I also remember. And then he moved, the Baba Rebbe moved, he moved also probably a few years later to Borough Park, and he passed away at the age of 87. This was the skier. This is the story of the skier. This is the story that he corrected that I shared last week. Yesterday I get an email. A woman sends me this picture. You see this picture? Okay, I look at it. In the email, a woman sends me a picture of 3 of her children skiing. Now, it's a very cute picture for a mother, I'm sure. No? I couldn't understand what's the relevance to me. I mean, I appreciate all pictures of beautiful Yiddish Kinderlach, but I didn't know, like, what am I going to benefit from seeing a picture of these 3 beautiful, handsome young children on the ski slopes, even smiling and not frowning, which is a second miracle. So she sends me an email. Hello, Rabbi Jacobson. I'm going to read it verbatim, almost verbatim without the name. She gave me permission to read this. I wanted to thank you for your recent shiur on finding your child's soul on the ski slopes. It was tremendously validating for me and gave me much chizuk, strength and inspiration. I'll tell you why. You might find this as an interesting coincidence. So let me tell you about this coincidence. Last week was my children's yeshiva winter break here in Silver Springs, Maryland. My sons are great, great boys. They learn so beautifully. They are very, very successful yeshiva students, Baruch Hashem. But 4.5 years ago, they were little children. Their father suddenly passed away. My husband died suddenly, and life became a whole new series of challenges in parenting. I was a lone mother with a bunch of kids. Suddenly there's the financial burden, the psychological burden, raising them alone. I wasn't prepared for it. I would have never asked this as a challenge in life. After my husband died, their father died, I made it my mission to take my family on really nice vacations during our summer and winter breaks. I never spent time on vacations when my husband was alive. We were just home with the family. But now, I realized with some rabbinic guidance, it's important to give my family things to look forward to and add fresh, exciting, and vibrant, fun things to our lives. My sons, now ages 15 and 16, have gone skiing a few times with their yeshiva. They asked me if this winter break I would take them skiing. I really would love to go to sunny Florida. That's my idea of a vacation, and I wanted to tell them, let's go on a beautiful vacation to Florida. But that's me. They wanted to go skiing. I wanted to be a great trip for them. So I agreed, and we planned a trip to Vermont for our winter break, even though I personally really did not want to go there. What can I say? My kids had the time of their lives. My daughter, much younger, very young, a little kid, had never skied before. She took a lesson. By the end of the day, she was skiing down the big mountain with her brothers. She felt so proud that she only needed 1 hour of lessons to get acclimated and enjoy skiing. It was a cold, very cold, bitter cold, expensive day. I was exhausted, but my children had the time of their life. They thanked me over and over and over for taking them skiing. They told me it was the best trip we ever did. It was something special for them. They connected to each other. They flexed their muscles. They exercised. They had great time. And for them, it was a relief of a lot of the pain and the trauma and the stress. The next day in the morning, we came back. I'm exhausted. And I get a notification on the web. You posted, or your people posted a new shiur. I look at the title, Finding Your Kid's Soul on the Ski Slopes. I'm like, wow. I right away start listening to the shiur. I hear the whole part about the Baba Rebbe himself assigning a boy who knew how to learn to teach the other boy how to ski. And suddenly, my whole vacation was so validated. By who? By you, Rabbi Jacobson. Better, by the Baba Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha himself. As a single parent, I can't tell you how much I wish that someone would once in a while validate me. Somebody would tell me once in a while that I'm doing a good job. It's lonely on the top. No camaraderie, no companionship. And we work 24 hours a day, and it's myself. I have to be the father, the mother, parent, the family. And there's nobody there. There's nice people who help me, but nobody there to really be able to look at me and tell me that I'm doing a good job with my children. When I heard your shiur, especially the timing of it, I felt like this was a message from above, that indeed, I'm doing a good job. It was so, so healing for me. Thank you so much, and please keep up your good work in disseminating Torah and the wonderful classes to the women. Okay, then she gets personal with me, but she says very nice things. So now I feel validated, and she signs her name. And here again, besides obviously the personally moving element of it, I really learned the lesson that I often see in life constantly and constantly. The only question in life one has to ask is, am I moving forward or backwards? There's a mountain, a glorious mountain. There's a promised land ahead of us. Every person is empowered to bring healing to people, to bring light, hope, love, validation, encouragement to people. Every person can do it in their own way. We can get distracted with so many other things. It's so easy to get distracted. And there's a lot of things to get distracted. But when you listen to the words of Moshe, 3,300 years ago, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yiso, move forward to accept the Torah and bring it to the world and heal the world with its powerful and loving message. If a sea has to split, it will split. Have a wonderful week.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.